Hey, how are you? Good evening to you. Good Wednesday evening to you, everyone. It is good to see you. It is good to be seen by you. And I, of course, am Bill Sylvie, a.k.a. the Dungeon Delver, coming to you live from an undisclosed location. And I hope you're having a particularly wonderful evening. We've got Kyle is here, of course, because it's Wednesday, and that's what we do. So we're going to have Kyle on in just a few minutes. We had a lot of fun playing some first edition AD&D last night. And if you missed that session, maybe it's because you're not subscribed. So please click the subscribe button, click the bell icon for notifications so you find out when we do this stuff. Because it's, it's 5 nights a week. Sometimes we start at 8. Sometimes we start at 8:30. Sometimes we start at 9. But if you click the subscribe button, then you'll know. Bring this over a little bit closer so you guys can hopefully hear me a little bit better. Hello, Jimmy James. Good to see you, my friend. And I'm going to start off before we bring Kyle in. I've got a little quiz because I see there's 8 of you lurking out there. Hopefully, there's going to be more. 100 internet points. 100, not 101. I'm a man of limited means, but not 99 because I am generous. 100 internet points to the person who can identify this string of numbers. 1843-6572. If you know what that is, if you know what that means, type it in the chat. That's tonight's trivia. But you know what's not trivial is my co-host, Kyle Schuant, who is lurking in the green room. We're all out of Victoria bitters and Vegemite, so he's probably not going to stay patient for too long. So let's bring him in and say hello. Kyle, how you doing, my friend?
Hello, boys and girls. Are you aware that here in Australia you can now get Victoria bitter aftershave?
That both horrifies me and doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I would have thought there's a pretty easy way to just smell like Victoria bitter in the morning.
Yeah,
like the evening before. And
just so. Yeah. You will have that. I'm
not convinced that it really pulls the chicks though.
Probably not.
There's nothing like the smell of a man hungover in the morning. I don't think is a phrase that a woman's ever said. Well, not with longing in her voice anyway.
Yeah. Because you could make the claim that there's nothing like the smell of a tire fire in the morning and not mean it with any affection whatsoever. But it's good to see you, Kyle. You're looking a lot better after that gosh darn Mexican cop shot you in the chest plate. I'm glad you're back on your feet. But anyway,
reference to my new glasses,
and your new haircut, We got to include the haircut in there.
I've had response from 3 separate people. You look clean. No, they didn't say clean cut or something. They just said clean, which is not a really great compliment. What was I looking like before?
No, I know exactly what you mean. I ran into a buddy of mine. This has been a few years back. I ran into a buddy of mine at the grocery store, and he was there with his wife, who his then wife, I should point out. They are departed from one another's company now, but I'll never forget. We were high-fiving and fist bumping and everything, my friend and I, and of course, say, oh, hey, it's good to see you. And she just had this total deer in headlights look about herself and said, "Hi, Bill, you're looking better." And I was like, what? Better than what? I hadn't been sick. I hadn't, I hadn't spent 6 months in a loony bin or something. To this day, it's like if I gave enough of a damn, I would say, look, I know you and Rusty are divorced and everything, but what did you mean? What did you mean better?
Jimmy says I'm looking high and tight. No, high and tight is like when it's like actually just about shaven on the sides.
Yeah.
It might look a bit like that, but that's because of the grey.
Yeah.
That's there. So it looks a bit more like that.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Not high and tight. I'm
not an American cop or something.
No. There's a
it could be one with a bandana. There's a little channel I look at sometimes, and it has U.S. police shootings on it, and some of them are good ones and some of them are bad ones. Some of them a little bit dubious, and in this particular incident, there was a suspect who went into a sort of who had been pulled over by the police, and then he'd been apparently armed, and he'd gone into a bushy area. And so they were calling back and forth with him for some time and everything, and telling him to throw down his weapon, put his hands up and that. But he said he was hurt, he was injured, he couldn't come out and everything. And so they sent one bunch of cops in along with a dog, and another bunch of cops stayed back, and one had an AR-15 or some variant of that, and he had the magazines taped to each other. How many rounds do you expect to fire, man? That like you got 30 rounds and then flip it over 30 rounds.
Well,
this wild songs in the Congo. He had that, and he had a black thing taped around his head, like Rambo strap around his head.
Dude, bro, policeman.
And like, yeah. And then when the suspects started shooting at them, he'd apparently wanted to lure them into the bushes so he could get more of them or something. I don't know what the hell was going through the guy's head, and we can't ask him anymore. But when they went in and the suspect started firing at them, he just started firing straight at them. So all the cops had to go down because he was basically firing through the cops. This guy, apparently, no charges were laid. Like, I sort of get why no charges are laid against the shooting of the suspect, but maybe like look at your training practices a bit.
Yeah, better.
He had the high and tight and the Rambo bandana on and the magazine strapped.
I am reminded of an incident that happened. This was in, of course, there were riots in Los Angeles in 1991. We'll go into the specifics of why. If you should know why, it's an important incident. But in the practice of cleaning up the city, the governor and mayor requested that the military support law enforcement. And they took it as a chance to clean up some really bad neighborhoods. So they said, hey, we're going in, there's a crack house. It's in this neighborhood where, we just need you to back us up in case things get hairy. So a couple Marine Humvees across a vacant lot from the house were there, and they had I don't know if they were M240s or if they were 50 cals, but they had pintle mounted machine guns in the Humvees. Now, there's a parlance in active police work where cover me means draw your weapon, point it down range, be prepared to shoot if the situation calls for it. In the military, cover me means provide covering fire. So as the police form their semicircle and are moving towards the house, and they're in position for the jump off, the sergeant, detective, lieutenant, whoever was in charge of the police unit got on the radio and said, "Okay, cover us." And both support machine guns on the Humvees lit the house up with machine gun fire. So, yeah, good time.
Communication is important.
Yes, communication is definitely important.
It says in the good book.
In the good book.
It says.
Let us read from the Book of Conflict.
New players will be surprised to find that without teamwork, good intelligence of the enemy, proper preparation, planning, and some luck, their adventurers will quickly die. Though they can, of course, if they wish to try an idea, usually anathema to players, try to talk to their enemies. Communication's important. That's part. You can't have good teamwork without it. I see a lot in the police shooting videos as well. As a lot of Simon Says going on. Nobody's officially in charge, so everyone's just busily shouting orders to each other. They don't work together terribly well.
Death Angel's asking, did I get swatted? No, thankfully. Although, I have to say, I wish I could say with 100% confidence that there's nobody out there in the old school Dungeons and Dragons tabletop community online presence who would get angry enough at me to swat me. I wish I could say that, but the world is a messed up place, and I cannot say that with full confidence that someday somebody wouldn't be like, what do you mean your characters aren't dead at 0? Hello, police.
Yeah, they want to know if we're talking about a real incident or a role-playing game. Does it matter?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's some real incidents, unfortunately, but there are plenty of real incidents out there in the world, and we use them or abuse them, as you, depending on how you want to look at it, to inspire us for role-playing games. Both in what to do and what not to do, and as DMs in scenarios to give as well.
So Damien asked me an interesting question. Was the film Krull an adaptation of Expedition of the Berry Picks? No, I don't think so. I mean, I wouldn't put it above any studio ever, anytime, any place to have looked at the popularity of D&D and pinched a little bit of it and sprinkle it into their films as a bit of pop culture. D&D got a lot of very backhanded play in film in the 80s. And I'm not just talking about mazes and monsters, because that's abominable. We all know it. But in E.T., the kids are playing Dungeons and Dragons at the beginning of E.T. when Elliot encounters the titular Xeno. But also, I think the first reference was actually, and I mentioned this before, in the film Taps, which starred Timothy Bottoms, Tom Cruise. There were some other kind of Brat Pack sort of actors that came up in the 80s who were in Taps. But it is a blink and you'll miss it moment right at the beginning before everything starts to go really bad, which of course, sets up the movie. Tom Cruise's character is walking through the halls of this military academy where he attends, and one of the underclassmen says, "Oh, hey, are you playing Dungeons and Dragons with us this Saturday?" He said, "No, man, I can't. I got to study," and keeps on going. And it's a blink and you'll miss it moment, but it's there. So I definitely think your Hollywood types were aware enough of it. And I can't help but wonder in the context of Taps, because D&D was getting a lot of flack. This 1980-81 was the ramping up, at least here in the United States, of the moral panic, which we talked about some Monday evening. If there wasn't a very subtle implication that as you watch the entire movie and you watch these students, what goes from a student protest to, students have seized the campus to students have seized the armory on the military academy campus and are now holding off a National Guard unit. If maybe the producers of the films weren't like, ooh, we should throw in a reference to that Dragons and Dungeon game to show, just to kind of set up the implication that these kids are, they're a little, a little kooky. So
there's also the thing of there's two things. One is that if there's pop ideas floating around, you can't help but include them in whatever story you're making at the time without even realizing it. And there's another thing, I've forgotten the damn word, but there's some word for an official word for unconscious plagiarism, where a person's just like read a piece so many times that when they come to write their own piece, it comes out pretty similar. There's some word like that, and the person's just genuinely not aware of it, but it's just so ingrained in them. So I think like if you've played a lot of D&D, then and you sit down to write a story, then some stuff is going to come out.
Yes,
and that's why I just consciously plagiarize instead. I just roll stuff up and okay, what movie does this make me, or book or whatever does this make me think of? Okay, I'll stick that in my dungeon.
Exactly so. And it's interesting that we come to this, when we talk about real world situations, and you said, does it matter? That sort of thing, because I was thinking about this, and I'm going to put a question to the audience tonight. And Kyle, you and I have kind of bantered back about, but while you guys in the audience are thinking of questions of Q&A, and that was a good one about Expedition into Barrier Peaks, Damien. Thank you for that. But I'll throw this out there, and Kyle, this is for you. This is for anybody in the audience that wants to ask. Yes, I am familiar with that one. Didn't that have Richard Mall in it? The Dungeon Master? I think it did. Or no, Clint Howard. Clint Howard was in the Dungeon Master. But anyway, is there anything?
Well says Joel. We all have our own Appendix N running in the background.
Exactly so. But is there anything? Is there ever a time to look at a topic, at a subject, and say, no, I don't think it's right. It's not right to have a role-playing scenario or an entire role-playing game built around that. If you're talking about a real-world situation, is there some stuff that you just got to say, no, that we shouldn't game that. We're not going to game that, and that's not, that just we should not do that. And as you think about this, Kyle, and audience, as you guys think about it, let me share my 2 cents on the subject. I don't know, maybe you'll all just go, yes, Bill, I agree with you, and then we move on, and this is not anything, but a role-playing game, if we take the actual definition of the word, playing a role, you have to have someone to play the role too. So a role-playing game is at least 2 people, and I am firmly, absolutely 100% of the belief that what 2 consenting adults do in the privacy of their own home, at a minimum 2 or more in the privacy of their own home, as long as everybody's consenting and it's something that they all want to do, which I guess would fall under consenting, regardless of what it is permissible. I mean, granted, there are limits, right? I mean, if what these 2 adults have consented to do is saw up another adult and put them in plastic bags to feed alligators later, no, clearly not. But obviously, with a few caveats, what consenting adults get together to do is their own business. So clearly, if you have a group of people that gets together and say, yeah, we want to role play where we're members of the Cambodian People's Army, and it's 1976, just outside Phnom Penh. I mean, I got to be careful about YouTube, so you guys know what I'm talking about when I go down that direction, and I don't have to say it. That's entirely up to them. They can, Should they? I think that's incredibly distasteful. But I'm also not going to kick in the door of their house and say you shouldn't do that. Now, if somebody posts about it on Twitter or an RPG forum or wherever, and they're like, "Well, what do you think of our?" I will take them to task and say, "What is wrong with you people? That's not, I don't think that at all." Where is your line, though? I mean, and Kyle, I guess I'll put it to you first as people put that in. What do you think? Is there a line of gameability?
Generally speaking, no. There are things that I can't see how I would game it. I don't see how I would do it. Look, I don't see how I would do it, but I mean, I also don't see how I would play tennis. So I think there's two different things here. There's like what's morally wrong, and there's also what you can have fun gaming, or what's gameable. So there are some, like Crapphone saying, like common decency, like, there are things that I'm just not interested in gaming, whether they're moral or not. I mean, okay, obviously you're not interested in gaming, mass murder and assaulting of minors and things like that. It's morally wrong, and virtually everyone is not going to be interested in gaming that out. And if you encounter someone who wants to game that out, in most cases, you won't want to associate with the person generally, let alone, not even in a game session, even if you don't see them the rest of the week. But there's other stuff that it's not morally wrong, but I'm just not interested in, like romance between characters. I don't mind if a character has a romance, like Pendragon, because you game by, and Ars Magica and stuff, you game by seasons. Well, now if you want to have an heir to pass your wealth onto, you better get yourself hooked up. But you don't have to role play it all out. Your character does this, and we can just do the fade to black, like they do in daytime soap operas or something. You don't have to go through all the details. It's not at all morally wrong, quite contrary, that romance. But do we need to go into the details? Same with anything. I mean, like, why didn't Conflict go into all the details of all the different injuries you can have? Well, number one, it's insanely complicated. Two, it's a role-playing game about conflict. It's not a role-playing game about medicine. So, yeah, I think it's two different things: what's morally reprehensible and what's gameable. And some morally reprehensible things will be gameable to some people. There's those guys who play racial holy war and stuff like that. And I don't think they played it too many times, though. It doesn't. When you look at it, it doesn't strike you as something that they game too often. It's a crappy game. What
was the one you were? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just a crappy game, and yeah. Crapphone says, great excuse to avoid a game your friend wants to try, but you think sounds awful. Sorry, role-playing rabbits in Watership Downs is morally offensive to me.
There you go. Lux says, I wouldn't play Fatal. Nobody would. I mean, honestly, the two guys who invented that, and it took two people to write that thing. I don't think they even played Fatal. I'm still not entirely convinced that Fatal wasn't a massive, but like a commitment to a bit. Like just commitment to a bit. But I mean, no, I think
whenever Byron Hall had his exchanges with people online, he seemed to be genuinely surprised that people were offended. I think the guy's just socially retarded or something, and
No, that could be. That could be.
He's probably retreated to a cubicle in an office somewhere and is asking people about his stapler.
What was it? You had mentioned this before. You talked about like a LARP where some people they sat.
The Swedish LARP where they went to a Cold War fallout shelter out in the woods somewhere, like 12 of them or something there, and then they sat there and they locked themselves in for the weekend. And the scenario was, okay, a nuclear war has happened. And then they just talked about how they felt about it. They didn't say, okay, let's start making our own lead acid batteries or something.
Right.
Or, when we emerge from the fallout shelter, are we going to try to help people or steal from them or anything like that? It was just, they just talked about their feelings about nuclear war and the world being destroyed. And then there was the, I can't remember what that was called. And then there was another one. It was a tabletop role-playing game called We All Had Names, where you role-play as Jewish people hiding in German-occupied territory during World War II. And one by one, you're picked off. In the end, you all get dragged off to death camps. But it's one by one. You role-play that up. Now, I don't think that's morally reprehensible, and I get where people are coming from in that if they themselves are from a comfortable modern Western lifestyle, particularly if they're not themselves Jewish and they don't know the history and that they're kind of exploring history in a workshopping kind of way, I kind of get where they're coming from, but it just sounds so fucking miserable.
It does, and for me, like that's one of those things that like I would feel when you say the word game. I mean, that conjures up as an activity, as a verb. When you say the word game, it conjures up kids with a basketball or checkers or something like that, and I would
fun.
Yeah, it conjures up fun, and it would wear on my conscience greatly to think that I'm doing this for entertainment purposes.
It's sort of a dark kind of entertainment. It's like Volcano God just said, my pet peeve is playing role-playing games and discovering that one or more of the other players are using it to work out their emotional issues. Yeah, role-playing games are not or tabletop role-playing games. We didn't sign up for therapy. I understand that there are registered psychotherapists who use that kind of thing, but that's not what the rest of the game table signed up for. They came up to roll dice, eat snacks, and kill orcs. So it's and you're there trying to work out the trauma from your parents not giving you enough ice cream when you were a kid or something.
I've often thought that if I ever did seek out a therapist, that I would bring like an 8-sider and a 20-sider in my pocket, just so that he said, okay, I want to role play something out with you. Just break them out and be like, cool.
And Death Angel's comments that role-playing games are supposed to be an escape from reality. Yeah, that's it. It's not a misery porn delve into the worst of reality.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean that's like I have talked on the show a lot about my love of Twilight 2000. It's an adventuring game. It's kind of grim and gritty and that sort of thing. But it toes the line, of setting the world right, even if the world is just the village full of Poles who just want to be left alone. Just
Saw the RPG.
Huh?
Jimmy says saw the RPG.
Oh yeah. Even if it's just a village of Poles that just want to be left alone by everybody, and they would like you to wipe out some bandits, and here's a couple of sacks of potatoes and 2 canned hams for that job. Please go away now. But Twilight 2000 is one of those that's right on the bubble, because you lean a little too hard into the, you're back in America. You finally made it back. You found some tramp steamer that would take you and anything you could carry in your arms, so you're not going home with a tank. And okay, we're going. Finally getting home, Kansas City. Kansas City is a flat glass plain. And there's Hiroshima lovers' shadows on the few remaining people. At that point, I'm like, I'm checking out. I'm like, come on, I wanted to fight Russian tanks in Alaska, with a team of special forces guys. But probably the best comment is so far. What is it? Michael Connor, who said, never met anyone who claimed to have played Numenera who could describe anything that actually happened in game. Good point. But to go back to what Volcano God was saying, all kidding aside, DMs are not your therapist. If the players have agreed on it, if this is something that they've all decided, but don't spring that as a surprise.
Yeah.
On your table, please.
Look, role-playing games can definitely be serious, and they can be have serious issues in them. But in the end, it is a role-playing game. Both elements are important. It's like I tell newbie trainers, like personal and trainer, both of them are important. You develop a relationship with the person that you're training. You can't just have them get under the bar and start squatting while you call them an arsehole. You can do that, but they won't come the second time.
Yeah, you can.
So the personal and the trainer both matter, because like the personal relationship determines how much they enjoy training, which determines do they keep coming, which determines do they get results. Likewise, role-playing a game. If you have only role-playing, well, you're being an actor. And if you have only game, well, you may as well be playing a role-playing, playing a war game or a computer game or something. So, a game is an activity which has a series, some degree of choice and chance, and where the outcome is uncertain. And role-playing, well, we all know what that is, but it's the two together. And obviously, different RPGs are going to have different emphasis on those different ones. And of course, within a particular game group, there's going to be different emphasis. You can have a really bestie D&D game, and you can have a really hacky D&D game. Thus Packmaster coming out of it. But first as parody, then as a more serious game. And it doesn't seem to have done as well as a more serious game as it did as its initial parody edition. Which shows what people were really after, the game. So I mean, there's nothing wrong with having serious themes within your game, but bear in mind, it's a game. It's still a game. Yeah. Like I've had a few campaigns where players are busily emailing each other afterwards. Oh, what are we going to do next? And it's not just about how they distribute the loot or whatever, but planning out what they're going to do. They're fully into their characters. But they went home from their game session happy. Thoughtful maybe, but happy. They didn't go home from the game session sad at the tragedy of life.
Right.
As you would if you had role-played out, we all had names, or the weekend in the Fallout shelter, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we all have names, as it is exactly as we've described it. I can't imagine signing up for the weekend. Maybe I'm just not that committed, or maybe I shouldn't be committed. I don't know, but just the idea of so what is this game about? Well, you're gonna come out this weekend and The defense shelter in the hill. Yeah, I've heard about that place. Well, we're gonna hang out there. Oh, cool. Is it paintball, airsoft? No, it's a LARP of what if the bombs fell.
Well, crap phone
Why?
says, I remember in the 1970s living in wargaming in London, there was a huge argument in the community about wargaming, the troubles in Northern Ireland. And so that's why we're talking about the consenting adult thing. Sometimes things can just be a bit too close for comfort. And that can be because they're big events and they're contemporary events, or they can be too close for comfort for that individual. So most people would probably not be worried about wargaming, the troubles, now 20 plus years on from the peace agreement. But you might have in your game group a veteran, a British veteran, or somebody who lived in Belfast or something at the time, and they don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting that Crap Phone brings that up, because I saw this. There's a YouTuber. I watch her stuff rarely because most of the time she talks about Warhammer 40K and issues with Games Workshop. Unlike Wizards of the Coast, who only do things stupid on a quarterly basis, Games Workshop does stupid stuff every month. So she has, 10 times my number of subscribers, so because she has endless content to talk about. But she posted something on Twitter the other day, and I guess Warhammer Plus is like the D&D Beyond, but for Warhammer 40K. And one of the things that they've done, I mean, you can love or hate Games Workshop all you want, but they do have a good handle on how to do digital content. And one of the things that they've got is a filter, like a background filter that you can download as an app on your iPad or phone or whatever, and make yourself look like a space marine or an orc or a sister of battle. And she was watching the demo reel of this, and of people like out on a street with space marine armor on, just looking like they're standing out on the street. And she tweeted something to the effect of, having grown up in Ireland, seeing people out on the street in full combat gear, it really actually kind of bothers me. And my first reaction was, oh, get over it. But then I thought, no, I can see where that would go into that category of, not really, no thank you, not at the table kind of things for her. So I won't say I got it from a standpoint of, oh no, I know just how you feel. But I understand that there's a line, and that is over the line for her, at least slightly over the line for her. So it was.
Everyone's got their little things, and in a game group, like with all human interaction, you try to treat one another with respect and consideration. And if it's too much for that person, you back off on that. And if you find that basically everything that you do at the game table is too much for that person, they definitely need to find another game group. But I mean, if they really just don't want to talk about swords going into people's guts or whatever, then okay, fair enough, back off on it. It's just like respect and consideration for others. Others have boundaries, just like people who've got boundaries about physical touch. Like that's one that comes up in the gym too, because a tactile cue telling somebody, just up, if you like touch their upper back, they just automatically go like that, and they have a more upright posture, which is pretty useful when you've got a big weight on your back. But some people are obviously uncomfortable with it. So, you go ahead and do it as a trainer the first time, and if they look uncomfortable, then you don't do it again.
Right.
And if they're not bothered and they just go, then you go ahead and do it again. Doesn't mean it's time to slide your hand up their skirt or something. But there's obvious boundaries that everybody has to respect, and then there's the individual boundaries. And it's not about never crossing people's boundaries. if we interact with other human beings, it's like being in a crowd. You're going to bump into each other. You're going to get the occasional accidental bruise. But as long as it's the occasional accidental bruise and not deliberately elbowing someone in the head, that's
right. Death Angels brings up kind of an interesting point here, and I think this is like in the larger sense that he's talking about, like at comic stores, gaming with randos, or gaming with randos at a con. Not doing X cards. If session 0 starts with that stuff, I'm tagging out immediately. And that's something, and I've seen this thrown away. I've seen this thrown out by people who will say, if a warning sign for a GM, if they're not going to use X cards, then they're probably, you're not going to want to game with that GM anyway. It's probably they're going to be a bad game master, and they're gonna do some things that you're not gonna like. And I don't agree with that. I just 2 hours into a 4-hour session at a convention where you're talking about okay, the thief is searching the hall, and but they find the trap. Well, what's the trap? Well, you think it's a dart launching mechanism, and there's all these holes all over the wall, and someone, jumps up and throws down an X card and says, I have tripped of whatever that made up fear of holes is, so you can't have that now.
Volcano God wants an explanation of what an X card is. An X card is, it was a tangible thing. I think they even sold packs of X cards where you could say, you cannot bring up topic X in this game because it triggers me.
And so you say you have a group of 6 people, again, comic book store, gaming with randos, maybe you've invited them to your house on a meetup or something like that.
Maybe it's different over in the States, but I've never seen it in Australia. I've seen it discussed a lot.
I've seen it discussed a lot too, but I have actually, I've never seen it, and it comes across as one of those.
I think it's back to that old thing of Vestron Ross saying he could tell when he was a moderator on the GURPS mailing list, he could tell the difference between the questions that came up from actual play and the questions that came up from reading the rules. And I mentioned last week the guy on Dragon's Foot talking about different kinds of spears and that in D&D, and was like, dude, spears can already do a lot, blah blah blah, and he's like, oh, okay, and you've done it. And I said, I think you just need a game group, because he's sitting there looking at his book thinking about spears, which if you have an active game group, whether you're a player or a DM, you're too busy to think about all the different kinds of spears and that. That's what you do when you don't have a game group. Just like when I didn't have a game group, I wrote conflict, so so I think it's similar here. So I think people just sitting there thinking about playing a role-playing game think that X cards will be important, either for them to play, for them to use to veto a topic, or for them to respect when somebody else brings it out. But I think once you sit around the game table, like, unless you're a complete social retard, you get the feeling for the game group and what's acceptable and what's not, and what's acceptable for some people and what's acceptable for others. Like some people can get away with saying some nasty or crude or whatever stuff, and other people can't. They just can't pull it off. So
Crap Phone asking the important questions. Can you play an X card when somebody plays an X card because X cards trigger you? I think you could wind up with a mutually assured destruction scenario, but I like your thinking. I absolutely like your thinking. This Crap Phone is my kind of scum, ruthless and inventive. Oh.
Like I said, I've never seen it in the wild. I think it's just one of those like RPG net tangency open things that no one who actually games does this shit. They just they sit down at the game table and somebody else says something mildly offensive and they feel mildly offended, and then they reach out and grab another handful of cheesels and shove them in the gob and they forget about it. That's what normal people do. They get mildly offended by something that some obnoxious dickhead said and they just get on with their day.
I mean, literally the only negative feedback I've ever gotten as a DM is you really seem to enjoy being a confrontational DM and doing bad things to us. To which I always say, it's an act. I like to see my players succeed. Wiping out an entire party of characters, I don't care what the system. If you're the game master, it's easy. It is so easy to do. The trick is keeping them alive and watching them succeed.
Get themselves killed.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, superheroes game. Okay, we're all playing X-Men. The main X-Men are off doing something, and we're fighting. There's nothing you can do that I can't have enough Sentinel robots show up to start kicking your asses to finish the game. But when you go to the Sentinel robot factory and start randomly flipping switches and throwing levers, I, as a game master, now have to put effort into not making it a TPK, right? So keeping a party alive is much more difficult than wiping a party out. So adversarial DMing is just me. It's like a good horror movie, right? Michael Myers isn't waiting for you in the lobby. Freddy Krueger is not, in fact, going to come into your dreams that night. But is there risk for your character? Absolutely. Absolutely. And the gloves are off when you're in the dungeon. But when I see a party succeed, I'm just as gleeful and happy as I may appear to be when they don't. But that's like the chief complaint. I've never had anybody take me aside and say, Bill, your implication that halflings, ergo short people, are only good at thievery is very problematic. No one has ever come to me and said that, so I don't really worry about it. All of that falderall is to say that I agree with you, Kyle. I think it's one of those, it is a solution to a problem that doesn't genuinely exist, and it is a solution that was created in a laboratory vacuum container.
Yeah.
With no consideration.
Somebody didn't have a game group.
Yeah, exactly. Someone that didn't have a gaming group. Someone reading Ron Edwards' every word like it was, the Talmud or the, King James Bible, and going, yes, and what else we should have?
Where'd that fucker end up working? I've forgotten. There was some.
Ron Edwards. This is the most bizarre fucking thing. Okay, so for those of you who don't know who we're talking about, Ron Edwards is a theorist, and I mean that in absolutely all the terrible ways about tabletop role-playing games. He equated Gen Xers growing up and playing Dungeons and Dragons and our play styles and our approach to and our love of the hobby being informed by Dungeons and Dragons as being akin to being victims of molestation. That's not an exaggeration. You can go look up the man's words.
He said you're incapable of understanding what story was because your brain had been warped in the same way that a child abuse survivor has been warped by their experience.
And
he said literal brain damage. And when challenged, he doubled down and he said,
yes. So Ron, Ron created these bizarre and arbitrary divisions. You're a gamist, you're a simulationist, you're a narrativist. It's the three: gamist, narrativist, or simulationist. And it's stupid, and it led to about 23 months of circular arguments, and then he sucked up his own asshole and closed down his forums and said, I've said all there needs to say. This is a perfect philosophy, and we shan't discuss it any further. The ultimate irony is that bastard ended up working on the 6th edition of Hero System. The most stupidly crunchy spandex super. I would have figured that he would have been, creating a dungeon crawl game where you in fact go into the dungeon, but then your characters sit around a table and talk about their feelings with the goblins. Mr. Story Games himself, but no, he ended up working on Hero System 6th edition, which is the most 4-color spandex superhero comic book role-playing game since Marvel Superheroes from...
I prefer Jeffrey Ent's game theory. It says, instead of saying there's gamist, narrativist, and simulationist, he says there's retro, stupid, and pretentious.
Yes. Yeah.
Retro games make use of settings, mechanics, or assumptions that are now considered outdated by the RPG mainstream. But these same assumptions once defined that mainstream. Does a game have classes and or levels for no damn reason? That's a retro design element. Do you have a group of PCs going on ill-defined adventures with little or no motivation? That's another hallmark of retro design. These games may be old or intentionally designed with an old school vibe. Stupid games do not take themselves seriously. World of Cinnabar comes to mind. PCs can die horrible deaths and other grim stuff, but that horrible death might involve being eaten by a horde of zombie chickens. Big dice charts, such as wandering monsters or random mutations, are often associated with this style of game.
Yes.
Comedy games fall into this category, as do all the good versions of Gamma World. The new editions of Paranoia and Warhammer Fantasy role-playing look pretty stupid to me as well. Pretentious games know that they are better than retro or stupid games. They're not just games, they're cutting-edge explorations of blah, blah, blah. I'm sure you can all list an armload of pretentious games. Vampire, most of the rest of the World of Darkness, Nobilis, various Forge-inspired designs. I'd also put Hero and GURPS in this category as examples of mechanically pretentious games. You can have setting-based pretension as well. Blue Rose, Blue Planet, Tecumel Han, etc. In addition to a more useful categorization schema, my theory has another leg up on Edwards. Incoherent play is better. So Ron Edwards said that you had to be pure gamist, pure narrativist, or pure simulationist. That's probably why how he did the mental gymnastics to get himself working on Hero 6th edition. That it's pure gamist, probably something like that. And he said if you tried to mix styles of play, that was incoherent play and was therefore wrong or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
He said, you don't need laser-like focus on stupidity, pretension, or retroosity. Retro play is fun. Stupid play is fun. But retro stupid play is totally awesome. Case in point, Encounter Critical. Similarly, Vampire is plain old pretentious, but add some stupid to the mix and you've got Exalted or Street Fighter, the storytelling game. How about retro pretension? I've got 2 words for you. Classic Traveler. That's retro and pretentious, all right. The big hole in my theory is that black area in the chart where retro stupid pretension is found. That ought to be the most totally rad place in the universe. But right at this moment, the only game I can think of that definitely goes there is World of Cinnabar. But that game is at its best when drifted to retro stupid play, which is really easy to do. The trick is to not beat Raven C.S. McCracken. I suppose one could argue that Dungeons & Dragons fits the requirement to be retro stupidly pretentious, but every RPG theory fails the moment D&D is taken into consideration, so I probably ought to quit while I'm ahead.
Now,
every RPG theory fails when the most popular role-playing game is taken into consideration.
It is where the physics of understanding role-playing games goes to die. It is that spot that when we point the Hubble of forum discussions at, when we try and go through the Hawking equations of Twitter arguments over RPGs with, when you get to D&D, everything just kind of collapses and you're left scratching your head wondering if you're ever going to get a grand unified theory for the thing. But if I could go back in time and say this to Jeff, and I might, he wrote that, 10, 15 years ago? I don't
know. No, more. February 27th, 2006.
Wow. Okay. But if I could sit down and crack open a cold one with Jeff Rintz, I would say that the trick to fitting D&D into the retro stupid or retro pretentious paradigm is not to try and look at not to try and look at it as a mega structure that fits within the theory, but to look at separate parts of it. And it comes down to which fantasy setting you're talking about. Greyhawk is retro stupid. First edition AD&D Greyhawk is absolutely retro stupid. Planescape is retro stupid pretentious because it's got AD&D's retro stupidity.
Definitely retro stupid.
Dark Sun is absolutely retro stupid. But yeah, Kabuki Kid says this is all new to me somehow. Let me tell you something. I hate to sound pretentious about Kyle and I, but honestly, you're getting all you need from Kyle and I, except also go read Jeff Rent's blogs about this. But you're getting all you need from Kyle and I on the subject. There is not a fine wine of story game / GNS theory sitting on the shelf. If you open that bottle and drink from it, you're going to get a mouthful of vinegar. It did not age well, and it is not worth your time to try and diddle with. Jimmy Invictus says Traveler was pretentious. How? Kyle?
Well, it's there's the game itself on paper, and then there's how it turns out in play. Those are two different things. The game itself on paper was not pretentious. You could just look at the rules, and you could end up playing Star Wars or something. You could play it full-on space opera. Most people, though, seem to have drifted to more, I wouldn't say realistic, but realistic themed. So they had stuff that they tried to argue was scientifically plausible. The Traveler mailing list went for like 20 years. I mean, it's probably still going, but it went for like 20 years. And they did things like trying to argue how to map 3D real-world space onto the two-dimensional parsec hexes and try to make sense of that. The simple answer is that it just gave the DM less to map. Because like if you want to have a map that's like from where you are 6 hexes in either direction, then not only do you have to have this one map, but you have to have 6 maps underneath it and 6 maps on top of it if you want to do 6 hexes in either direction. And it just, you end up with a ridiculous number of worlds that they could be going to, and then you have to start doing some Pythagorean kind of theorems to figure out the distance between the different worlds and that. And it's a total pain in the ass. So just have a 2D style map, because like what really is the game about? Is it about realistic travel between different star systems? No, because then they wouldn't be traveling between star systems. So what it's really about is traveling between star systems and the adventures you have in those star systems. It's not really about the traveling between them.
I mean,
it's that's the episode, and the actual travel is the commercial breaks. So we're not really worried about what happens on the commercial breaks. So that's but what people ended up doing was arguing about the details, or like I did in my game, bring some scientific realism to it. So the game itself was retro. I added the pretentious as the DM, and the players brought the stupid, which is why it was such an awesome game.
Oh, we brought the stupid. we brought entire spaceships full of stupid. There was one comment earlier, and I want to address this just real quick, and it flipped by. And this, just so we're 100% clear, Ricky said this: RPGs can be there with consenting groups. There are many levels of RPG. Absolutely, and I don't disagree with that at all. Again, the big caveat is if everybody's consenting, do whatever you want. I guess this is just more like the 30,000 foot view is where I'm going with that. But no, as far as Traveler goes, I think there's so much, or not just Traveler, but other classic RPGs. There's so much overthinking on how they're supposed to function. I mean, Dave Hargrave grabbed a copy of OD&D, and upon finding the % in liar typo, assumed that Gary meant that the monsters would all have a percentage chance of not telling you the truth if you talk to them. So all of the monsters in Ardu and Grimoire have % liar. He just grabbed that typo and ran with it. We're gamers. There's something wrong with us. Okay, don't overthink it. Don't get super caught up in it. And just just have fun. Alan Canning says AD&D pretentious. Absolutely. Not by default, but I think you could sit down at a table with somebody they've got a first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, a first edition Monster Manual, and a player's handbook for each player, and that's it. There's no Dragon magazines being referenced. There's no there's no Unearthed Arcana, nothing. It is as it was in 1979, and that's how you get it. And you sit down at your first game, and the DM has already told you, yeah, we play from 5 to 10 every Saturday night. So 5 hours. I'm locked in. We're going to party like it's 1981 again. All right, here we go. And they spend 4.5 hours describing how their just one kingdom's politics work. and all this house is set against this house, and the master of this guild has got spies in these other guilds, but those guilds are working with the king, but it's actually a double blind. The king doesn't realize that they're working for these guilds, and just on and on like that. And you're out of courtesy, you're not screwing with your phone or your Apple Watch or whatever, and your eyes are glazing over, and you're thinking about having another Dr. Pepper because, God, you got to drive 20 miles to get back home at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. And then the game ends, and he says, all right, and we'll be back next week for more of that. That is AD&D pretentious, and it can be done. Unfortunately, I've seen it done.
Yeah, well, Magnificent Devil says pretentious games are about how they're different from all other games, and that's why I'm distinguished between the text of the game book, the rule book, and how that particular campaign goes. Because, Mark Miller is not going to claim that Traveller is different from all other games, because when he wrote it, he tells the story. I'm not just asserting this. He tells the story. He sat down with the 3 little original D&D books and said, okay, I want a sci-fi version of this. What do I need to do? And that's why there's strength, dexterity, endurance, intelligence, education, wisdom, and then social class instead of charisma. And it's whatever, 2 to 12. We don't need 3 to 6. Let's make it 2 to 12. There we go. And that's we won't have classes, but we'll have skills. But it's like, okay, so we need the character generation chapter, we need the equipment chapter, we need the combat chapter, we need a thing about making campaigns, adventures, and so on. I've got to put in a thing about interstellar travel because I have that. And so on. He literally sat down with the books and he copied out their layout. He's like, what things do I need to put in the rules? So he just made a sci-fi version of D&D. He didn't copy the rules word for word, but he copied the structure. So he'll be the first one to say it's not different from all other games. It's just sci-fi. That's all. But when you run it, you could certainly run it in a pretentious way if you want to. I did. So, but yeah, me, I'm pretentious.
No, I think, and Damien hits on something here. White Wolf Obsidian equals home of pretentious games. I think there are games that have a lot of stuff that's baked in, and it's very difficult for a game master to extricate from. If the default mode of the game is pretension or story game or whatever like that. Yes, you can have let's draw our swords and wade in and hack and slay things and get treasure and come back out and heal up and go do it all again the next session. You can do that with any system. But yeah, I think Damien hits on an important point. White Wolf and Obsidian are the home of pretentious games. I think there's work you have to do as a game master if you want to switch things up in how a game is supposed to function. I think again, I think you're definitely you're definitely not incorrect there. That pretension, if it comes baked into a game. You know, I remember asking someone, because my default is, my default for how good is a game is, how easy is it to have a dungeon crawl in your game? And before you say, oh, Bill, that leaves out so many games, it doesn't really. Star Wars, the role-playing game. The middle of Star Wars, like literally the entirety of the second act, is a dungeon crawl. The party goes into a dungeon. They get a treasure, the princess. They fight their way out. Tell me it's not a dungeon crawl, and I'll tell you you're wrong, because you are wrong. It is a dungeon crawl. Twilight 2000 has a module called the Black Madonna that takes place in the uncollapsed sewers near the ruins of Warsaw. It's a dungeon crawl. There's a treasure. There are rooms with monsters. This is not some vague, hand-wavy, like, oh, it's a dungeon crawl in that you have a goal. No. But to get back to story games, I remember asking someone about Nobilis, and I said, this is on a forum, and I put it to them that the game that can do a dungeon crawl is a good role-playing game. You've given me something to work with. And so I asked this person who was big into Nobilis, or had, I don't think anybody was ever big into Nobilis, but at least they understood how the rules worked. And I said, can you have a dungeon crawl? Can you go? Can you kick indoors? Can you get treasure? And, you know, can you do that in Nobilis? And they started on this falderall fan fiction answer that I didn't even ask for. And I said, you know what? That tells me all I need to know about it. I would hate Nobilis. So thank you very much for your time and answering my question.
I can't remember the name of the damn thing. And I looked up the author. I thought it was Greg Stoltz, but apparently I'm blaming him for it wrongly. But it might have been called Violence, the Game of Egregious Bloodshed or something. But anyway, the basic setting of the game was you're just a common criminal, and you'd go through housing projects and kick in doors and murder the people and take their stuff.
Yes, it's Greg Costican.
That's the one I was thinking about.
Greg Costican. I haven't communicated with him in a long time, but he and I are Facebook friends, and Greg's an interesting guy, to say the least. But yeah,
and I just felt that game was. I'm glancing through it. It's trying to send a message. You know, think about the poor kobolds kind of thing. It's like you're saying, because essentially that's what you're doing in D&D. You're attacking poor people and taking their stuff. It's like, really? It's like, games that are trying to send me a message.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I kind of understood the tongue-in-cheek attitude. Okay, yeah, technically you're just committing a bunch of home invasions in D&D, but I mean, no, I'm not. I'm not really. Thank you, Magnificent Devil. I just wanted to pop that up on the screen so I didn't forget it. You can definitely have a dungeon crawl, Nobilis, but the dungeon is going to be something high concept, and the monsters will be nihilistic anti-reality invading it. That sounds great. You guys have fun with it.
Kostikian didn't work on RuneQuest. You're thinking of Greg Stafford, who was the original author, and he's about 100 years old now or something. And they're up to like RuneQuest 7th edition or something like that now, and they've gone fully down the Glorantha rabbit hole. Like they've gone the same way like Han went and Tecumseh and all the rest. So deep into the lore that, like what Bill described about the Saturday night D&D game, where it's 4.5 of the 5 hours describing the background setting. In most D&D games, you can actually get by without that. There can be that background, but it just starts off, you were the sworn men of this particular lord. And as you go through the campaign, you discover all that various politics that's going on. Like, you're Bronn. You're Bronn in Game of Thrones, and you have got no damn idea what's going on, but you find yourself working for Tyrion. And the longer you work for Tyrion, the more you find out about all the comings and goings and bribery and backstabbing that's going on in the world. And you're content just to accumulate treasure and drink and whore, and you're happy with it. But you've become aware of what's going on. It's your decision not to get involved in all that, except in as much as you need to in order to keep Lord Tyrion alive, so he can keep rewarding you. So that's a better way to learn things in a regular role-playing game. But if you're playing Tecumseh or Han or Glorantha or something, you've basically got to have these pages and pages of copious backstory to know what the hell is going on and what your character can do and all the rest. That's why nobody plays these things anymore. There's a few collectors who grab the stuff, but nobody plays them.
I mentioned before a guy I know played in a game of Tecumseh being run by one of MAR Barker's circle. He was running this game and said, so, it was a 4-hour session at a con. He and his girlfriend were the only players, and 90 minutes of it was this guy doing world building around their characters. Like literally, like they had pre-gens, but then this guy started explaining the history of their characters' names. So here's Violence. This is the Wikipedia entry on Violence, and I posted it up there. But Violence is a satire of conventional dungeon bashing games set in a contemporary metropolis where the player characters dash from room to room, killing the occupants and stealing their belongings. In a style reminiscent of Mad Magazine, it is relentlessly user hostile. That is retro stupid, and I love it. Taking time out to insult the reader whenever possible. It opens with words, "Welcome to Violence, you degraded turd," and uses a system where the user can buy experience points for cash from the designer or publisher. Despite the innovative game design and exhaustive list of equipment and weapons, including both belt and orbital sanders, monster types, and possible scenarios, it is largely and deliberately unplayable because of an exhaustive rule set. The rule set provides information on a range of things related to killing. Weapons, combat styles, and the like are intricately detailed, considering the short length of the volume. Violence is a rant against traditional styles of Dungeons & Dragons, Memorpagas, and the Grand Theft Auto series, written to simultaneously annoy, enrage, and challenge the reader. As a game, it is of little value, but it is useful as an insight into the mindset of its author and an indictment of an endemic style of role-playing. So
yeah, I think that's just fucking stupid and insulting. I don't need to buy it, that just insults me. It's like when I got an award at a convention, best and fairest DM. They said you were the best DM, so we gave you the rawest role-playing game. They gave me Hull, human-occupied landfill, and it's a rubbish planet where all the rubbish of the galaxy gets sent, and that includes the people who are rubbish, the criminals, and that. And it wasn't even printed as such. It didn't have like typewriter text, proper fonts. It was like hand scrawled. It was like properly printed softcover book, but the design was like somebody's handwriting, as if it had been scrawled out. And it was just basically mocking role-playing games in general, and that. And it was a piece of rubbish. And there was another one called Buttery Wholesomeness. It was a supplement to that, and it was just awful. It was just awful. I moved house at some point, and that went into the rubbish bin. So there was this period about I want to say 1995 to 2005, something like that, where all these parody role-playing games started popping out, and where they there'd be moral explorations of your feelings about killing baby kobolds or some shit like that.
Yeah,
and that was the same time that story games came out as well. So all sorts of role-playing game deviants appeared in 1995 to 2005. And despite this accepting between consenting adults, I don't agree. I think some things are just inherently wrong, like playing violence or playing Fatal or whatever. And like, I'm not going to stop you doing it, but I'm not going to associate with you in any way, shape, or form if you do it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There was a spate of games, violence, a lot of story games and everything that were like, well, let's explore the ugly truth behind the dungeon crawl, behind the and that it's from the same crowd that the insult murder hobo came. So you're murder hobos. You just go from town to town, killing everyone and taking treasure. And you don't have homes, and all you do is kill.
Fuck off, dude. Go write an article on RPGNet.
Go cry to Polygon. Polygon is still in business. I think they're one of the only one of those idiot websites that's still around. Go cry to them.
Aren't all their articles AI written now?
Yeah. Most of those articles are AI written. But so somebody was saying something. The Dying Earth RPG by Robin Laws is pretentious, stupid. That's okay. Let me, Kyle, you can answer this. Audience, you guys can answer this. I have had so many people, at least 4, that's many to my caveman brain, say, oh, Bill, that thing you just said, that's very, that's like that's adjacent to what Robin Laws said in his rules of game. And I'm like, I've never heard of this guy. He didn't write any part of the Dungeon Master's Guide. He didn't write any part of Keep on the Borderlands. So I couldn't really tell you what Robin Laws has to do with the price of tea in China. So if anybody out there in the audience, and I hope I'm not like, Robin's my best friend, Bill's about to start to what? In a moment. But he doesn't reach, man. So if there's something out there that just, if somebody can sum it up. Alan, thank you for the super sticker. Little super sticker from Alan Canning. Always appreciate it. Very nice. Postmodernist deconstruction. That's it. Yeah. And I was talking about this. I can't remember if Kyle was on. I went in. I was at a hotel bar. I had a delicious burger, and I saw on the menu it's just like deconstructed key lime pie, and I was like, "Could you just not deconstruct it? Could you just put the key lime pie in a plate or a bowl and just bring it to me?" And the waitress said, well, they just come, they come served in a jar. She brought me a mason jar. Like, you use spaghetti sauce, you wash it out. And it was like a parfait. It was like a key lime parfait, and it was perfectly fine. It tasted quite delicious, but why couldn't you just left it on a plate? I didn't need it deconstructed.
They do this in Australia too. There was, it reached peak silliness with the deconstructed coffee, where they basically gave the person a little shot of coffee and a little glass of milk and a little pot of sugar in that. And it's like, I'm paying you to put it together.
Yeah. And generally, when you get places like that have deconstructed stuff, as was evidenced by the very expensive hamburger and dessert that I had, generally it cost you more. You're doing less work back there. You literally just took the serving spoon and just whacked it on the side of a jar a couple of times to take this out to table 5.
The essence of pretentious is that it costs more.
Yeah. Yeah. At Kabuki, I think you hit it into orbit there. The gimmick sells to some people.
It does. It does. I went to lunch in a posh suburb once with one guy, and like I just ordered burger and fries, and the burger came out. It was a constructed burger, but it came out on a chopping board, not a plate, not in a but
Like a
but
wooden
on a wooden chopping board, and the fries were in a little wire basket. Maybe the same wire basket that they'd been in the fryer with. I don't know, the little wire basket. Like, where's my goddamn plate? You know, it's
Yeah. You guys know you could have saved $7 if you had skipped the wax paper and the authentic English newsprint under the fries. Excuse me, the chips. Just bring me my food. So somebody Kabuki talking about the gimmick sells to some people. It does sell to people, and there is no stronger evidence. Once that tube of pretension from, as Kyle says, like 95 to 2005, once that had started to really go empty in like 2010, 2012, you know what all those people latched onto? OD&D and AD&D.
Well, I was going to say story games.
Oh, well, I'm including
Sorcerer and Kill Puppies for Satan and Dogs in the Vineyard and all that sort of shit came out.
Yeah, Poison, Sorcerer, Dogs in the Vineyard. Yeah. Okay, so I guess after that, they all started wanting to do dungeon crawl games. And you had stuff like Torchbearer and what was another one? Dungeon World. And all that nonsense, and it's like that stuff is deconstructed D&D brought out to you on a butcher block with a wire basket full of fries and almondine vinaigrette instead of just some fucking ketchup.
And the games with a lot of background are the ones where they force you to eat one piece of your burger at a time. No, you must take a mouthful of the bun and chew it 30 times and then swallow it, and then take another mouthful of the bun, chew it 30 times and swallow it, and continue until the bun is eaten. Then you may have a piece of the pickle and chew it 30 times and swallow it.
Yeah.
You're like, but my burger's getting cold, man. And doesn't it just taste better if I just take a big bite and swallow it in one go? No. You must appreciate each tiny bit of the burger. Whether you like it or not, you must come to appreciate and understand that burger. Its deeper essence.
Yeah.
Like, give me the fucking mouthful of burger and, let's get on with things.
So I had a couple of friends, dear people, nice people, and it's just like when they would go out to California, when he would get a film gig and he would go out to California and work for a while, and he'd come back, they would always, he and his wife would breathlessly tell stories of various things that they'd done. And I remember, we're getting sidetracked on food, but trust me, guys, we'll come back. I promise we'll come back to RPGs. Don't click unsubscribe, please. I promise. But I remember we were talking about like getting something to eat, and they had come out from LA. I can't remember. It was just to stay with us for a little while or whatever. And so they started waxing poetic about some restaurant that they'd been to, and the chef would bring out essences. It was like a little freezer on a tray, and he'd open it up, and they had like the smells from the kitchen frozen into a little ball. And you take a spoon and you get, and it would melt away and you get the essence of and I looked at him and I was like, wouldn't that just be like greasy smoke in your mouth? Why would you do that? Why would I do that? I mean, I can smell the kitchen. I can smell the cooking from the kitchen, and I'll smell it more if you don't waste your time bringing frozen bubbles of kitchen smoke to me. If you just bring me my food and put it in front of me so I can enjoy it. And Kyle, you'd have thought that I had like I like kicked their mother. It was this guy, this restaurant, this guy is like one of the top chefs in the world, Bill. I was like, yeah, but is his food any fucking good?
There's that Heston Blumenthal has like liquid nitrogen in his kitchen and stuff. It's just, look, I understand, it's if you've been a chef for like 20 years or whatever, you've made the same stuff a million times, you just get bored. So you want to do ridiculous things, push the envelope, man. That,
yeah,
like it's going to be forgotten. Let's be honest, it's going to be forgotten.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, people are going to come back to the burger bar. People are going to come back to good old fashioned. They're not. No, I don't want to go. To the thrift store and we'll all buy 1980s clothes and LARP as kids from the 1980s while we play D&D. Let's just play D&D. We don't have to deconstruct it. Let's just play Dungeons and Dragons. And I kind of feel like the hobby has moved in that direction largely. And hopefully it'll stay there. Magnificent Devil. Yeah. Molecular gastronomy. I remember those words.
God.
I deconstructed some potatoes into some olive oil with some rosemary, black pepper, and sea salt. And then I deconstructed them onto a tray and I cooked them at 450 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes and served that and some roasted chicken to my family tonight. That's as molecular as I get, like the 3 coffee shops, the one said the world's best coffee and had a few customers. The second best said best coffee in the city and they had a few more. The last said best coffee on the block and had a line outside. And Kabuki says, if I haven't seen the movie The Menu yet, please do. It's quite entertaining and odd. I will, if you will see Tempopo. If you have not seen that, Kabuki Kid, I will watch The Menu if you'll watch that. Jimmy says, I'm not wearing parachute pants again. That's fine with me. That's absolutely fine.
The only parachute pants I ever had were when I went to the gym.
Right.
That was necessary. Necessary while doing my curls. So.
Right. I had... the closest I came to parachute pants in the 80s or 90s was I had a pair of actual they were like canvas parachutists pants, like somebody in the airborne would wear. They had pockets down by the calves and they were like cargo pants kind of thing. They weren't parachute pants like MC Hammer. But I think ultimately, we're all more or less on the same page. Just shut up and play the games that you want. Just play the meaning backstory. Do you want to play Dungeons and Dragons or not?
Shut the fuck up and roll the dice.
Shut the fuck up and roll the dice. And I feel like your backstory is what your character has done in the game. Nobody cares that you were John the pig farmer. There's not 5 pages worth of John the pig farmer's backstory before you were out in the fields one day and went, you know what? If I sharpened up the end of this hoe and kind of bent it that way, I bet I could kill an orc with it. It'll beat doing this nonsense.
Speaking of backstories, I've been reading this. So there's this woman, Carla Nayland. I came across a couple of articles of hers on, I think it was the size of armies in Anglo-Saxon England and Saxon.
Okay.
Post-Roman era. And there's a couple of other articles, and they were pretty interesting. And she wrote this book, Paths of Exile. I was also impressed by the the two snakes. They're not coming together.
They're not coming together. Baby steps. Baby steps.
Called Paths of Exile. So it's Britain, 605 AD. When his homeland is defeated by a predatory neighboring kingdom, Edwine finds himself on the run for his life. Homeless, penniless, and friendless, literally with a price on his head, he must evade his enemies, avenge his brother's murder, and rescue his betrothed. Along the way, he will lose his heart to another woman and discover a shattering secret that challenges all the ideals he holds dear. Sounds pretty dramatic. But, so basically this woman tries to write in a time that's a little bit neglected, like 600 to 800, before the Vikings arrive, and kick over everyone's tents. She writes about this. And it starts off very D&D because, at least in the first about third that I've read, because so Edwin's been leading an army that was harrying the invading army, and he loses most of his men in the process. And then he comes to the citadel, and he was like the fourth son, but by this stage he's the last son. the others died over time, and he's like, okay, Dad, this is great. We could just sit behind the walls because he's just got a few hundred men, and he'd be sitting out in the muddy fields. You could burn some villages and stuff, but there's no way you could breach the walls of the city that were made by the emperors before you. But sitting behind walls, it's not a warrior's way. We must go forth to fight them. Yeah, but there's more of them than us, and they're really good at fighting. No, we must sally forth to fight them. And so it has predictable results. So he ends up on the run, and then there's a couple of characters with him who seem fairly powerful and tough. And then there's a bunch of nameless guys, and the nameless guys drop off from time to time. And the named guys go off and do their own thing. One of them dresses up in his gear so that he can be the one captured, because the enemy's like looking for him, because obviously, if you kill the king, then his sole heir is someone that people might rally around. So you've got to get rid of him. So they're in search for him, but they don't know what he looks like. They only know how he dresses. So one of his sidekicks dresses like him and then goes off to let himself be captured and killed, basically. Gives his life in that way. Basically, then he's running around. And the places, like there's bugger all villages or anything like that. They've just come across a farm with some women who help heal him up. And there's very few groups out there that help them. One of his named guys runs off in the fog. He's convinced, like he sees a troll in the fog and runs off. And then they hear swords striking stone, and they have to busily run off themselves because there are actually men chasing them at the same time. It's D&D, right? You've got the one or two PCs, and you've got the henchmen, and then you've got the men-at-arms, and they're wandering around what's essentially a howling wilderness, which is very sparsely inhabited. They're dead broke, and they're seeking to make their fortune. Because if he builds a fortune, he will be able to hire an army and then go back and get his kingdom, establish a stronghold and clear the surrounding hexes of monsters and bandits and stuff. It's D&D.
Share that book title in the chat. Jimmy Invictus says, I don't know how I'd react if a player pulled an X card during a Dungeon Crawl Classics funnel. I don't agree with this. My character burned to death. Well, too bad. Paths of Exile, Carla Nayland. That sounds really good. The last book you recommended that I read, that wasn't Conflict rule set, by the way, but the last book you recommended that I read, Hawk's Quest, was excellent. Could not put it down. Page turner. Also fairly D&D. I should add. So yeah, I will definitely check this out, and you guys might want to check that one out too. But yeah, I mean that does sound like it fits the bill, and I rather like the idea. I rather like the idea. What's the page count on it?
it goes up to page 299. Okay, so a couple of pages are maps.
Always nice. I love having maps in books.
And there's also a list of characters. They've got a list of characters there, and some of them have an asterisk by their name, and some have a double asterisk. So the asterisk one's a historical figure, and the double asterisk is possible historical figure. See notes in the appendix. So she's got about 10 pages of historical and geographical notes. And she says, when I finish reading a historical novel, I always want to know what parts of the story are documented history, what the author made up to fill in gaps, and what, if anything, the author changed from documented facts. If anyone else shares this interest, this note is for you. More detailed articles on many aspects of the historical background can be found on my website. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so those appendices, and like she named a glossary of place names, giving them modern names, a note on proper names, and so on and so forth. So it's a historical novel, but set historically. It's not, try to be a documentary, but it's historical. She tends to focus on that rather than neglected area of history. I actually came across her site because I was doing a web search. I remembered that in Anglo-Saxon England, there are official terms based on how many armed men that you had going around.
Okay.
And if you had more than 35 men, it was called an army. If you had less than 35 men, it was called a war band. And if you had 7 or fewer men, it was called thieves. So, yeah, I think it was Hawkquest. Was it that one? I don't know. But yeah, there's one where they've accepted an 8th person, and the guy says, "Okay, we're no longer a gang of thieves. We're now a war band. Yay!"
Yeah, I don't think that one's in Hawk's Quest, but yeah, that's.
Oh no, that was another one. It was basically set at the time of the Viking raid on the monastery.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, yeah. So, this is why an adventuring party needs men-at-arms, because otherwise, this typical adventuring party is just a gang of thieves.
Just to get
Wouldn't you rather be a war band? A war band is more likely to end up, running a small barony or something.
Well, counting the party, the Monday night group, let's see, they have a drover to handle their cart and take care of their animal, take care of the 2 horses that pull the cart. And then they've got 17 men under arms, and there's anywhere from 9 to 11 players in the game. So I guess they've got something a little less than an army.
Yeah.
So they're a war band. I will adopt that for Greyhawk and tell them, hey, look, you guys hire like 5 heavy lancers more, and you're an army. You're an actual army in the field.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's great. I like it. It sounds good. Sounds good.
So at the moment, yeah, he started off with a war band and it's been whittled down as they went along. And because there was a neighboring kingdom that was supposedly allied with him and owed him, and he's wounded, and he's saying to his men, "No, don't go there, because our kingdom has been conquered. So he'll now consider that alliance over, and if it's a choice between having to fight this other guy and just hand over my head, he's going to hand over my head." And they went, no, it will be all right. And it's like, idiots. So they went off to talk to the other troops, and shortly he sees them turn around and running from those other troops. So he'd indeed been right. But that was also a D&D moment in that where he says, "Here, take my he says to one of his offsiders, here, take my cloak and stick it on this long spear. What, my lord? What? Why? And he says, okay, you're wearing my armor. Go off into the forest over there and wave the spear. Make yourself just visible and make a lot of noise. So make a lot of noise. So the enemy start chasing his guys towards him, and they see his 4 or 5 guys that he's actually got just on the edge of the woods. And then the enemy also see the glint of armor and the banner waving in the forests. And they hear a lot of noise, and they think, oh, hang on, are we dealing with a warband or an army? And so they decide, just in case it's an army, they need to turn around and go back. They turn around and go back, and then about 2 minutes later, they realize they've been fooled. But by this stage, the heroes have got an advance on them, and they can run away. So avoid unnecessary encounters.
Avoid unnecessary encounters. That, there's a. I happen to think, and just setting the magic aside, I happen to think that Lady Hawk is a very D&D movie. And there's a bit where Matthew Broderick tries that when he's afraid that someone is stalking him in the forest. He says, all right, men, show no mercy. Sounds like there's many of them. Ah, Pierre, you have your crossbow. Good. Well, I'll run ahead and warn the rest of our allies. Spare none of them. And he takes off running. It doesn't work. He doesn't sell it. He doesn't get the right reaction roll.
Well, yeah, it's the reaction roll, the morale check.
Yeah, so he does not get the right morale check. Where this guy got the morale check,
well,
and was
got a partial success because they didn't run all the way back to their keep or something, but they ran off, and then basically 2 combat rounds later, they realized they'd been fooled and then started chasing them, but they hadn't advanced on them by then. And the enemy were on foot and they themselves were on horses. So they just galloped until their horses were exhausted. Got the hell out of Dodge.
There you go.
But it was very much the sort of thing you'd see adventurers do because, the leader was gravely wounded and couldn't do anything except give advice, couldn't fight or anything. Like they didn't have enough horses for all the men, so some of them were doubled up. And the DM obviously didn't like them because it's raining out on the moors. They're in the rain and they're starving. And they're like, oh, but my background is, I'm secondary skill, forester. So I know what's good to eat in the forest with, mushrooms and berries and things. Because there was one guy like that. And okay, yeah, but you don't get quite enough to keep you going. It's like having a half share of iron rations or something. It's like, oh, damn you. You can feed one of you every second day. Today.
I'm reminded things that are like D&D. This is obviously not a novel, and if you've never played it, Kyle, I do recommend you at least give it a bit of a spin. Is the old Milton Bradley electronic game Dark Tower. There's a free to play Dark Tower out on the web, and one of the things that as a kid when I would see the box, it was like the princely sum of like $20-$30 back in the 1980s, which would make it the equivalent of like $120 today. But the one of the rules, and I found this when I played the online version, is you can build up armies to help you explore ruins and that sort of thing to try and get more gold to survive as you moved through the kingdom to try and get the pieces of the key and enter the Dark Tower and yada yada and win the game. But you have to keep your army fed. The computer, the plastic computer doohickey in the middle of the table that everybody punches their move into when it's their turn will keep track of your food, and you can literally be going along and you forgot to buy supplies in the bazaar, or you went to the bazaar and you underbid the salesman. He just won't do business with you anymore. And so you're out in the field and you'll get a little notification sound from the thing, and you look it up on the sheet, and it's like, oh, my part of my army just starved to death. Kabuki, my friend brought a broken Dark Tower to garage sale, and he cracked it open and just had to solder a wire. It was fixed. Nice indeed. Those things, the old ones, are pretty scarce because of Milton Bradley's perfidy. They had the guys that invented it. They're like, okay, so we heard of this game called Dungeons and Dragons, but what if it was a little more board game like? And instead of a dungeon master, you had a computer built into like a plastic castle in the middle. And Milton Bradley was like, it's not really going to sell. That's not, that's a little too complex. Which they then turn around and release Dark Tower. The creator sued, and the judge kind of did Milton Bradley, if you would approach the bench. that was the end of that. So they had to stop. Rather than pay them a huge license, they just said, screw it, we'll stop making the game, and we'll write these guys a check, and that'll be the end of it. So yeah, it was kind of rare-ish. And the ones that break down are, you got to know your way around a soldering iron and a logic probe and that sort of thing to keep them working. But anyway, hang on a second. So many buttons. Anyway, so I think we've probably chewed all the flavor out of the gum over RPGs for the evening. Kyle, any special plans for next week? Will you be back with us?
Of course I'll be back, but no special plans. Nothing I particularly want to talk about other than random rants.
Well, this I had a lot of fun tonight, and you guys apparently did too. Thank you very much, Alan, again for the super sticker. That is always appreciated, sir. You guys out in the audience were a lot of fun. We had a lot of good chit chat, and we'll be back. I'll be back tomorrow with some RPG fun, some retro RPG fun. I may pull something off the shelf to share with you guys. Maybe we'll take a look at Lonely Mountain, or maybe BattleTech, or possibly Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay again for a second look. You don't know. I'm just chaotic neutral like that. But anyway, thank you once again, Kyle, for being here. Thank you, audience, for being here. You are all lovely people, regardless of what Kyle says. So
the story gamers. Fuck them.
Yeah. No, I think we're all unified in the heck with the story gamers. So thank you all again for being here tonight. Thank you, of course, to my wonderful host. And I'm going to play us out of here by playing that song that we all like to hear by Bob Antone, and it's called Owl Bear. Peace. I love you all. Be well.
Have you seen my owl bear? Here's to all the weirdos everywhere, in the woods and in the air. Have you seen my owl bear? Should I shave off all my hair? Bobs are all around, some live in tunnels underground. Some are fat, some are rich, some are sleeping in a ditch. Can you ride a crooked horse without a saddle, way off course? Naked as a toad, all the way to Smoky Joe's. Have you seen the little creep driving fast in his little green Jeep? He smells like fish and brandy, but his rotten teeth look dandy. Take me to the show, I don't care if fast or slow. From action flicks to dancing dicks, just take me to the show.